Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Downtown Parking Committee meeting for September 9th, 2021. I'm glad you're joining us today. If I could have the roll call, please.
Committee member Labrie,
Here.
Newkirk,
Here.
Silver,
Here.
Zarate, absent, Pratt,
Here.
France, and Chair Pinner.
Here. Looks like we have a quorum, so thank you very much. Appreciate that. Do we have any changes to the agenda to report today?
Mr. Chair, we've got no changes to the agenda today.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll move on to item 4, announcements. Do we have any announcements on that? Any announcements to present?
So we wanted today to announce that our new Public Works Director, Cliff Maurer, has started. So he is here with us today and can say a few words.
Yeah, hello. Pleasure to meet you all virtually. As Sarah said, I'm Cliff Maurer. I've actually been on board a month now. It's hard to believe, but I joined the city on August 9th, and very pleased to be here. Just quick background, I served 30 years as a officer in the Navy Civil Engineer Corps, and upon retiring from the Navy in 2013, following year, I took a job as the Director of Public Services and Engineering, essentially a Public Works Director for the City of Coronado. I served in that position for 7 years until I chose to come up here to Santa Barbara. So I'm really happy to be here. Coming up to speed quickly on certainly the downtown issues. That's probably dominated a lot of my in-briefs, both with the city administrator office and my staff here, and my colleagues in the other departments, talking about loss of revenue, incredible changes to state business plan and the way it operations. So our internal public works organization has some key vacancies in that area, and I'm working with my managers and with Rebecca York on the way forward. So more to come on all that is work that out. But I think that's enough for now. Again, I'm really happy to be here, and it's a pleasure to participate with you today.
Well, thank you, Cliff, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to Santa Barbara. I see as a Navy man, you're having a hard time getting away from the water, from the Navy to Coronado to Santa Barbara. So that's pretty good, good duty, I think. So welcome aboard, and we look forward to getting to know you and work with you and working with your leadership. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 5, public comment. This is the opportunity for members of the public wishing to address the Downtown Parking Committee, areas that are in our jurisdiction, but items that are not on today's agenda. Do we have any public speaking requests? Or why don't you announce how to do a public speaking request?
Sure thing. If we can just move on to the next slide. So if you see the graphic that's up on your screen right now, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise or lower your hand button that's in your control panel. You can see that indicated with the green arrow there on your screen. And then we'll let you know when it's your turn to speak, at which point you'll be able to unmute yourself. So go ahead right now. I know we do have a few members of the public in attendance. If anybody would like to make general public comment on items within the purview of the committee, go ahead and raise that hand. And I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Clark. With that, we'll close public comment and move on to the next item of agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of August 12th, 2021. I will seek a motion to approve.
This is Barbara. I so move.
I have a first from Ms. Silver. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Mr. Pratt was quicker on the draw than Mr. Labrie with all the silence
That's
there.
one
So
Pratt.
thank you, Mr. Pratt. With that, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll call for the roll call, please.
Committee member Labrie,
Yes.
Newkirk,
Abstain.
Silver,
Yes.
Pratt,
Yes.
and Chair Pinner.
I vote aye. Thank you, motion carries. All right, we'll move on to item number 7, which is the budget and parking operations update. Ms. Clark.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. Back with your monthly budget and parking operations update. It's going to be a little bit of a shorter one than usual, but that's sort of anticipation of next month when we should have fiscal year 2021 closed out. And so we can give you those official year-end wrap-up numbers and really kind of go deep on our reserves. So if we go ahead to the next slide, please. So unfortunately, I'm not able to start you out with our usual occupancy and revenue, hourly revenue graphs this month. Unfortunately, the staff person who is the keeper of all of that data had to take some unscheduled leave this week. So we weren't able to get those graphs together for you. But if you'd like, I can send them along following the meeting and we can get those back together. So we'll just dive right in to where we were for August. Our occupancy continues to recover. However, we do continue to be a bit hobbled by our inability to maintain the level of staffing that we need in our parking lots in order to expand our hours of revenue collection. So, unfortunately, with the difficulty in hiring those hourly employees, we are finding that we're leaving some revenue on the table at this point. So for August, if you're looking back against last year, we're certainly in a better position than last year when we were, we were just sort of getting back up to a more reopened position. This year, this August, our revenues came in at about $500,000 for the month of August, whereas last August, they were only about 314. Our expenditures are also down a bit. Keep in mind, again, the month isn't quite closed out yet, so these numbers aren't final and will likely be adjusted, going forward. But at this point, tentatively, we did operate a bit in the black for August of this year, which is we're outperforming our budget and our budget projections a little bit at this point. Again, still early days. And our capital expenditures for this month haven't posted yet. So that seems to be a little bit delayed this year. Usually those would post earlier in the month, and now it seems like they're posting later. So, again, as always, these numbers are going to adjust as we go forward and as the month closes out. So on net, our fund at this point is we added about $125,000 to reserves for this month. Next slide, please. So this is that graph that we take a look at every month, just tracking, again, our operating revenues and expenditures and seeing how we're doing. I know that when this presentation came to you last month, it did show us as having operated in the black for July, but again, some of those adjustments that come in a little bit later, unfortunately push that back down under that line. However, for this month, like I said, so far, we are sticking our heads above water, so to speak. So if you want to move on to the next slide, please. Can you go back one? All right, it looks like we're missing a slide, so I'm just going to pull that information up and give it to you verbally. I apologize for that.
No worries.
Okay, just one moment. So this final slide was meant to be a discussion of our reserves position. So I don't have a detailed breakdown for you, again, the year having not closed out yet, of how we actually finished FY21. So this information is going to be taken from our budget and from our projections. Hopefully we'll end up outperforming those by a little bit, but so the chair had requested a discussion of policy reserves and what those are. Usually when we bring you the reserves picture, we just kind of talk about the overall, but as I'm sure you're aware, our total reserves balance is kind of broken into two pieces. There was what we call policy reserves or council policy reserves, and that is the sort of level of reserves that we are expected to maintain per council policy. And then there's whatever we have over and above that. So the goal is always to keep those reserves above policy in order to ensure a healthy fund and that we have this cushion so that when unexpected events like this happen, like the pandemic, you know, we have that to fall back on, or if there's a major capital need that arises, things like that. So those policy reserves break down into three major parts. So there's disaster reserves, which we're required to keep 15% of our overall operating budget as disaster reserves. So that number is going to fluctuate year to year. So these past few years, as we have had lower expenses because of the cutbacks we've made on staffing and all the things that we've done in order to try to save money, that policy number that we have to keep in reserves actually shrinks a bit. Then there's contingency reserves, which is 10%. That's, you know, just for other needs and expenses. And then there's capital reserves. So all of those together, taken at the whole, our total required reserves per policy at the end of fiscal year 2020 was about 2.3 million. So that's how much we're supposed to keep as reserves. At the end of fiscal year 2020, after we had, you know, kind of gone into our reserves in order to cushion the blow of the beginning of the pandemic, we ended the year at with total reserves of 5.8 million, 5.9 or so million dollars. So we were above reserves by about 3 million. For FY21, or a bit less than 3 million, but for FY21, we were projected to use about $2 million of reserves in order to get through the year. So where that leaves us, again, this was a projection from our budget, was that we would finish just below that line at about $155,000 of reserves below policy. So again, we don't have those numbers finalized yet. I'm going to bring that picture back to you hopefully next month, and we can get a better idea of where we actually finished up. But then for the year FY 2022, we budgeted to use another $660,000 of reserves. So along with the other kind of adjustments that happened to that, at this point, we would project that we'd be finishing fiscal year 2022 about $818,000 below our council required reserve level. So again, I apologize that slide, I'm not sure how that got lost, but it wasn't there. But that's just sort of the overview of what we would expect. So kind of we're expected below that policy reserve line. And then of course, as our budget changes going forward and we rebound and some of those expenditures might actually come back up, that policy line is going to go up as well. The amount that we're required to keep in reserve is also going to change. So that's a little bit of a moving target, you know, but we'll take a look at that in greater depth, and I'll be bringing back everybody's favorite graph of the two lines that cross next month when we go further into that. So at this point, that's all I have for you. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Appreciate that. Before we go to questions and comments, can I let the record reflect that Mr. France has joined the meeting, another committee member. So thank you, Mr. France.
Thank you. My apologies.
That's okay. Yes, thank you, Ms. Clark. Sorry about the slide as well. If next month, we appreciate the update, the way you gave it to us. But if we could just next month, you know, as you close out those numbers and you do get those numbers final, bring that back to us. It is important to know where we are on that and what we have to think about in the future as we normalize what to do to get those reserve levels back to their healthy and appropriate levels. Does anyone on the committee have any questions of staff? And since we're doing all cameras on, just go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question and I will recognize you. Okay. Seeing none from the committee. I don't have any other further questions, so thank you. We appreciate the work and the graphs that tell us where we're going, and hopefully, I do have a question. Is there a way to change that line that's at the bottom red that when it goes above, it turns into a different color? No, I'm just kidding.
I can try. I don't know if my Excel skills are quite there, but I'll give it a go.
It'd be nice to not see it as a red line anymore if it's above the line.
It's true.
It made a lot of sense before, but now it's like, oh, I wanted to see it be a different color like green, but we understand. We appreciate that. Okay. With that, we will close. Oh, sorry. I need to open public comment at this time. So I would like to open public comment on this item.
Okay, if there's anybody in the audience who wishes to speak to this item, go ahead, use that raise your hand button. And I am not seeing any public comment on this.
All right, thank you very much. We will go ahead and close public comment and move to the next item.
Oh, there was that reserve
There's that
slide.
slide.
Sorry, it got lost. So there's that if you want to take a look at it.
Let's just take a moment for the committee to take a look at this. I don't think you need to. I obviously got out of order. So.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions on why this is up on the screen from anybody? Okay. Seeing none, we'll officially move to the next item. All right. This is item number 8. We are now looking to reestablish the Finance Subcommittee of the Downtown Parking Committee. We had a subcommittee fairly active pre-pandemic, and we've had some changes on the full committee since the time of that. The subcommittee is not a scheduled set time for that committee. It meets as needed, as requested by the chair or the vice chair. And it's to look at issues as we were just discussing here, starting to look at our reserves, things that we might need to look at, sort of longer range planning efforts. So we have decided to reconstitute the Finance Subcommittee, but with the change in membership, we need to do a new slate of nominations. The Finance Subcommittee usually consists of 3 people. I often sit as an alternate or fill in for that as well. So this time I'm going to open up the floor. You are welcome to nominate yourself or nominate another member of the committee. Mr. Newkirk.
Chair Penner, could you remind us who was on this committee pre-pandemic?
I believe prior to the pandemic, it was Mr. Pratt, Mr. Janeway, who is no longer a member of the DPC because he moved out of Santa Barbara, and myself. I hope I have that correct.
Chair Penner, I believe, Brennan, Sean? I believe I sat on the Finance Subcommittee as well.
Okay, Mr. France. Maybe you and I alternated. I can't remember, but thank you. So does that answer your question, Mr. Newkirk?
Yes, thank you. I guess I'd be interested if those individuals are still interested in being on the committee, or if there's a desire of them to not be part of it.
Well, Mr. Pratt, you'll have to answer that question for yourself.
I have a very strong desire to stay on that committee.
Okay, so shall we call that a nomination of Mr. Pratt that's to be on the committee? Do we have any other members wishing to serve on the Finance Subcommittee?
I'd ask if Mr. France would be willing to continue to serve.
Thank you, Mr. Labrie. I would.
Okay, so we have Mr. France, Mr. Pratt.
But since Mr. Zarate is not here, can we nominate him?
We could, I don't know if he, I would say that if he has a desperate desire to need that we can't have, I believe, well, we can have three, or we have more than three. I'll ask staff, there's not an issue with more than three, or is there?
Mr. Pratt, I believe that you can't have, I believe that 4 people would constitute a quorum for this entire committee. So I don't believe that we could have 4 people. We would need to limit it to 3.
Right. So right now we have Mr. France, Mr. Pratt. I mean, I can continue to serve. If no one else is at this time wishing to do so, that would constitute the third at this point. And then I could alternate to an alternate if Mr. Zarate wanted to serve and be voted differently next month.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I see Ms. Silver is trying to speak, but is muted, but I am not interested in serving at this time on the Finance Committee, but would ask Ms. Silver if she is.
I don't have any experience, so it would be a startup role for me. So if there is somebody more experienced for these strange times, that would be better.
Okay. Thank
I
you,
mean,
Ms.
I'm
Silver.
willing to do it, but I'm coming from behind.
Thank you.
And
Well-
Mr. Pinner, if you're willing, I would ask if,
Okay.
if you're willing to.
Yeah, no, I'm willing to continue to serve on that for sure. So if we call a slate now of Mr. Pratt, Mr. France, and myself as that subcommittee. Do we have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion on the motion? This is your moment, Mr. Pratt, Mr. France, to
get out of it.
change. No.
Would we want to suggest Mr. Zarate as an alternate?
I think I can reach out to Mr. Zarate afterwards and see if he has interest in it, and then we can look at that at a separate meeting,
Okay.
at a separate motion. Okay, seeing no other discussion regarding the motion, I'll call for the roll call, please. Actually, I'm not required to open public comment for this, am I?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Roll call, please.
Okay. Committee member Labrie,
Aye.
Newkirk,
Yes.
Silver,
Yes.
Pratt,
Yes.
France,
Yes.
and Chair Pinner.
The chair votes aye. Thank you. I forgot to mention that the people on this committee will get to, we'll try to meet together and we'll get special donuts or any kind of other goodies. So sorry for you who didn't want to join the committee.
That is explaining my strong desire to be on this committee.
There you go, Mr. Pratt. He remembers the good goodies we had before. It's been a while since we've gathered together as a group and had a morning coffee together. So we'll try to do what we can to make Finance Committee more exciting. So thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 9. That is the State Street Promenade update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just going to be brief this month. I don't have any slides for you. There's not a whole lot that's new to report. The State Street Advisory Committee has begun holding meetings, although I don't think that they've established a regular meeting schedule at this point. So we'll keep you posted on that as that moves forward. And then I encourage you, of course, you can, as with all of our committees, you can sign up on the city's website to receive mailings and notices from that committee if you're interested in staying up to date on their agendas and their meetings as they go forward. So I would encourage you to do that. Excuse me. Outside of that, on State Street, the majority of our energy continues to be on the enforcement portion of that, pursuant to council's direction back at the end of June. excuse me, to focus on particularly enforcement as it relates to accessibility for State Street and for the parklets. And so the first push of that effort that we've been engaged in these past few months has been focused on getting the sidewalks clear. So the unpermitted dining materials primarily have been removed from the sidewalk for the most part, as well as some other things that had sort of popped up. Some retail establishments had placed displays out in the sidewalk, various planters, benches, signs, freestanding signs. So, all of those things are what we have been addressing. In total, we've inspected around 173 different businesses. Of those, we ended up issuing 80 notices of violation. And fortunately, most businesses were super cooperative and resolved the violations immediately. We do have a handful, I believe about 6 businesses that have moved on into a higher level of enforcement and a citation process. So we've issued, I think at this point, a total of I think 6 citations, 6 or 7 citations, and we've got another few that are going out today. So we do continue to follow up on those holdouts, but overall, we're very pleased with how that effort has unfolded. Of course, there's certainly interest from the businesses, particularly the restaurants, in maintaining an expanded outdoor dining footprint. In some cases, that does include operating on the sidewalk. So Mike Clunan, who's a project engineer here in Public Works, has been working very closely with those businesses that wish to enter into the city's outdoor dining license program to try to get them to a point where we have a sidewalk dining configuration that is consistent with particularly the city's accessibility requirements for those. And so there are a number of restaurants that are in that process in order to actually to get a license to have permanent expanded sidewalk dining. And staff continues to work with to work sort of amongst ourselves and with the businesses to find ways to ease that process. And in some cases, maybe approve configurations that we haven't previously considered, where again we're able to continue to maintain accessibility. So that whole process just moving forward. There's not a whole lot new to report there, other than we do continue with those enforcement efforts. Coming soon, we will begin enforcement on accessibility of the actual in-street parklets and enclosures. So looking at things like ramps, tables, clearance, maneuverability, things like that. But that is sort of a more specialized enforcement effort. So we're working now on getting staff some training and the training that they need in order to effectively enforce those requirements and to understand the requirements that they are enforcing. And we're hoping to get that effort started soon, hopefully under the advice of a certified accessibility specialist. So we've got a CASP who we'll be meeting with soon to go over some of that. So it remains a priority and we continue to move forward. And the program overall remains very popular. Even now we have new parklets, new dining enclosures being placed in the street. So, restaurants and businesses continue to pursue that option as a way to add some extra seating and particularly to add outdoor space during the pandemic. So that's all I have for you right now. So if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. I think I have the date correct. I do believe the next meeting of the Subcommittee State Street Advisory Committee is September 22nd. And I do believe they've set a regular once a month schedule. So
I stand corrected. Thank you.
It's like the third, whatever that day is. But I will let you know that the committee here, DPC, that I am planning to attend each and every State Street Advisory Committee, to be there to help be a liaison between the Downtown Parking Committee and the Advisory Committee. So I will be able to report back after each meeting if that's the desire of the committee, to let them know any highlights of that meeting and any things that are really affecting DPC. I did attend the first meeting. The first meeting was really just organizational efforts and getting their kind of introductions of everybody on the committee, selecting a chair and vice chair and working on a schedule. So they were just doing sort of initial organizing efforts. Mr. Davies is the chair and Mr. Saxon is the vice chair, which I think are both great, excellent selections for that committee. So it'll be an exciting and dynamic group to watch, and they will helping develop a lot of guidelines and policies that will ultimately affect downtown parking committee, and I should say affect downtown parking operations, which will affect our committee. So I will endeavor to report back and give you guys an update on what's going on there. And I would encourage anyone else too who would like to join. The meetings are recorded, so if you can't catch the actual meeting, you won't be able to make comments if you need to, but you will be able to watch it and get the full gist of it. So, all right, I'll open up any other comments or questions of the committee regarding the downtown promenade update. Ms. Silver.
So this is just to clarify, from what I understood you to say, Sarah, new parklets are continuing to go up and with no oversight as far as accessibility at this point. Is that right?
Chair Pinner, Ms. Silver, they are allowed to continue to construct parklets. That was, again, pursuant to the direction that we received from City Council back in June, was to allow new parklets to continue to be built. However, I wouldn't say that there is no oversight of accessibility. We do require and have required for some time that people who wish to build new parklets submit their designs for approval in advance. Now, it's not a fully rendered architectural design. Usually, these are things that are just being put together by the business owner. But we do review in advance and impress upon them the importance of meeting those accessibility guidelines. So, no, I wouldn't say that there's no oversight of that. So, we do in some cases have people who build the parklet without seeking that prior approval, in which case we endeavor to contact them as quickly as we can to make sure that they're aware of the guidelines and what's required of them. But in general, we are reviewing the parklets before they go in, and again, impressing upon them the importance of adhering to those guidelines.
So to make it clear, it's more a process of consultation than oversight.
I mean, I think that would depend on how you would define one versus the other.
Well, you see where I'm going with this, so I don't want to seem to be coy with you.
Right. So, if a design is submitted to us that does not appear to adhere to the accessibility requirements that we have with respect to, size, configuration, clearances, ramps, et cetera, then they're told that, and they're told that they need to change their design in order to do that.
And that's the end of the story. They're just told that, period.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, they're told that, but they build what they build.
Well, I think that's the case for anything, even when we are approving a formal building permit, that's approved, and then, the contractor may or may not build to those plans, but then the inspection towards the end of that process would reveal whether or not they did so. So, we tell them what they have to do.
But there's no inspection at this point.
Well, like I said, we are going to begin going around and doing inspections specifically for the ADA access, but we do try when a new parklet goes in and we see that it's been completed. They are also supposed to inform us when they complete installation. We do try to go by and visit that and do an inspection at that point. But this is not a formal permit process, so I want to be careful about sort of implying that we have some sort of inspection process that's akin to what you would do for a building permit.
Thank you. That's the clarification I wanted.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Labrie.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Sarah, just a follow-up question on Ms. Silver's comments that you have said we. multiple times. But is Mr. Clinton really under DPC, or is he outside of that? And the reason I ask is DPC has protected and maintained a really excellent record of community customer service, and the parking system exists to support the commercial and cultural and the activities downtown. We're not in the enforcement business for ADA. In terms of the public's perception, I wouldn't want to see DPC confused with an enforcement agency with regard to, in particular, building codes or ADA access issues should be turned over to the appropriate enforcement folks at the city. And Victor was always so good at both keeping the community accountable while at the same time being a tremendous support to those who live and work downtown with respect to his job description. And so that's a broad question. If you could just clarify, are we getting into the enforcement, and what is our customer service oversight, if you will? Are we making sure that our customer service as we interact with parklets is good?
Thank you, Mr. Labrie. So, we would concur that downtown parking is not now, and certainly historically not been, an enforcement agency. This is a responsibility that this is obviously a very new program for the city, and it's something that was done in response to an emergency situation. And so because we manage the on-street parking basically, and the downtown plaza, it's something that has been housed in downtown parking for again this emergency period. So it remains to be seen what our role is going forward for enforcement. But to answer your question regarding Mr. Clunan, Mike Clunan is a project engineer in the Public Works engineering section, particularly the section that concerns the right-of-way encroachments. He has managed the city's outdoor dining license program for several years, well predating the pandemic. And so, this is his area of expertise. And, certainly future sidewalk dining efforts and installments would continue to be housed in that section. So he's not somebody who is a part of downtown parking. He's somebody who is a specialist in this area.
Thanks for that clarification.
Okay. Did I answer the remainder of your question?
Pretty well. It's something I will continue to be concerned about as scope creep, that there's costs to expanding our role, and I just want to make sure we stay within our lane.
Of course. Thank you.
That was a parking pun from Mr. Labrie, to stay within our lane. I do want to follow up on Mr. Labrie's comment. It has been a role, as you say, Mr. Labrie, that we've expanded into sort of plaza work with Mr. Garza's prior involvement, and it was excellent that we I think it was helpful to know that we were, being involved with that and making sure sort of the reason for our parking is to make an opportunity for visitors and merchants to come down and enjoy downtown. And sort of there was two ends of that coin. One was the parking and one was the experience. It's almost reminding me that the committee's name should almost become Downtown Parking and Plaza Committee if we keep continuing in the role where we're going in efforts. So I appreciate Mr. Labrie's comments, and just making sure, as he says, stay in our lane. So thank you for that comment, Mr. Labrie. Are there any other comments from the committee on this item?
Mr. Chair Pinner, if I could comment real quickly. Longer term, we have, noting your concerns, and they're the same concerns we have with getting into the enforcement business, and it's something we're not used to. but we've been put in this position and we're doing the best we can. We have begun conversations with other public works divisions and managers to discuss how this is going to roll out in the future. So those discussions have begun. It's going to take some time, obviously, because there's a lot going on downtown. We've got the State Street Advisory Committee that's up and running now, but that obviously is that master plan process is obviously going to take a few years. So we're working on some interim solutions, and we will keep you posted as we move forward with those discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Boss. That's very helpful to know. All right. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee on State Street Promenade? Well, I do want to thank staff, though, for the effort that they have been asked to do in this effort with the parklets. And obviously, I think the part of the reason it falls on our thing is because it revolves with parklets and it's street, and it's kind of a nexus between, it was parking spaces, now it's restaurant space. And so we've sort of gotten into that through that, hey, it was a car space and now you're using it for different use. So we appreciate the effort staff is doing for our city. And, you know, I do get a lot of positive feedback about the efforts as far as what it's doing for the economic vitality for downtown. And it's, to be honest, it's a big part of why I think what you showed in our revenues, why our revenues are up. People are able to come down and enjoy downtown, and also that requires parking. And so we need both parts of that. So we appreciate staff's effort and in managing that. And as Mr. Bossy said, I'm sure over the next 12 to 24 months, as the advisory committee works on their project, we'll get more understanding of where that goes. I will open up, before I close this item, I should open up public comment. Make sure there's anyone in the community that wants to speak on this item.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we do have one hand raised. I see a hand up from Accessible Santa Barbara. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, Accessible Santa Barbara, you should be able to unmute yourself. Okay, Mr. Railing.
Good morning.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm having struggles with my laptop. Good morning. This is Will Railing speaking for Accessible Santa Barbara. Thank you for putting on this item. It's very helpful to have your monthly review of what's going on with the accessibility of the sidewalks and the parklets and the sidewalk dining. I think it's really important to keep in mind that while on the one hand, the city is helping each of these individual businesses expand into these expanded areas and to help them have these expanded areas be accessible because the business itself could get in trouble, just like if they built a new dining room and didn't make that accessible. So the city's really helping the businesses with this so-called enforcement. Because you know, we're an explicitly anti-litigation organization. We think there's way too many ADA lawsuits. This is well publicized, the problem with that, and sort of our mission is to try to do something to help reduce those by helping local communities enforce themselves better, thereby preventing these sleazy ADA lawyers from coming through town and suing everybody on a block, which is happening all over the state, as I'm sure you've heard. Santa Barbara has done a good job in the building department, for example, in enforcing accessibility, and that's why you haven't had, for the most part, these kind of high volume lawsuits against businesses in Santa Barbara, because the building code process has been excellent. There was an incident in 2019 where one of the high volume plaintiffs came through town and sued, half the businesses on one block of State Street. So it can happen. The other thing is that the city has an ADA Title II obligation as a public entity because this is public space. So the city's really protecting itself as well because under ADA Title II, any use of the public right of way needs to be accessible. It's a program, service, or activity of the city also. So you're playing a very important role in this enforcement. Lastly, I'm glad to hear that the licensing program is in swing again, and that Mr. Clunan in Public Works Engineering is processing new applications. For the record, the original 40 or 42 licenses that were issued pre-COVID, there were significant accessibility deficiencies in some of them, and I know that Mr. Clunan does a good job, but he's not a CASP himself, so I'm really glad to hear the city is bringing some CASP help. CASP is a Certified Access Specialist Program. It's a very elite certification, and so that's it's the acronym is CASP. And it's good to hear the city's getting some technical expertise in that effort because it is, like I said, very important that these all be made accessible so everybody in the community can participate in the economic recovery exemplified by these expanded areas. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rayland, for your comments. We very much appreciate it. I know you've been able to join us in many meetings before, and we always appreciate your feedback. Thank you very much. Okay, is there any other speakers for public comment before I close public comment?
We do not have any other hands raised at this time.
Thank you. So at this time, I'll close public comment. And Mr. Newkirk, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, I had a comment. Thank you, Chair Pinner. Just on the kind of time it's going to take before a master plan comes to fruition. I heard the 2 years, 12 to 24 months. I mean, that'd be shocking if a master plan got adopted in 2 years. The city hired a master planner, which is great. And there's, I think, budget for a second position as well. So there'll be 2 planners specifically devoted to that project, but they're going to be herding cats on that advisory committee. And then any plan, you're still talking about planning commission, city council, possible general plan amendments, all kinds of zoning amendments. I mean, this is a massive, massive project. So I think it's really important that we're not thinking that the master plan is all of a sudden going to resolve all the questions of State Street. And then even with a master plan adopted, it's totally unfunded. So anything that master plan envisions will not come to fruition until there's actual funding to do it. I think I asked that question, for the FY 21-22 budget. I think it was mentioned that there, the CIP was 80 million, totally unfunded for the master plan. So again, that's no small chunk of change. So I think it's really important for us as committee members, those kind of keeping tabs of the advisory committee process, that there really is going to be an intermediate phase for State Street. I don't know what that will look like, but we have this parklet system now. That master plan vision, I mean, we're talking like a decade probably before we see that. So I think it's really important to think about that intermediate term as well when we think about what State Street's supposed to look like. And I don't know if the advisory committee is tackling that. That sounds like a lot on top of actually trying to do the master plan process, but I just think that's really important to be considered of with this committee and more broadly considering State Street.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Newkirk. Spoken like a planner and someone who knows planning. So thank you. I think often when we refer to a master plan in 24 months, I think it's really more the recommendations from the advisory committee would be completed in 2 years. I concur with you. Sort of the elephant in the room comment that really it's a lot longer process probably than we all expect and a lot more expensive than we all expect. And so far, we're going to be in some sort of interim stage for potentially a long period of time. I think that's your point. And so I think we're still we don't really know yet how this is going to play out. Based on my review of the first State Street Advisory Committee, they're still trying to figure out what they're supposed to provide. So it's going to be a work in progress. And I guess on that point, staff, you are doing your best to deal with these issues. And as Mr. Newkirk is saying, we're going to have to see what comes in. March is the expected date, was the original date for the order to be lifted, emergency order. We don't know, that might get extended, and who knows, this could be continuing for quite a period of time. Any other comments from the committee? Mr. France.
Thank you, Chair Pinner. If I could just speak to some of these comments made. First off, thanks to our public speaker. I think that this committee, Downtown Parking and Public Works, takes ADA issues very seriously. And I think the challenge is that we've been under an emergency order, and there really wasn't models locally for parklets, which were a really needed solution for the inability to provide indoor dining. If we were going to maintain downtown economic vibrance, we had to figure out how to do outdoor dining. And I think staff, some of whom are no longer with us, did their best in an emergency situation. Unfortunately, it's a very steep learning curve. And parklets were really novel here. And I think that it's really important to highlight the issue of sort of, as Mr. Labrie points out, scope creep. We have both a whittling budget, and we've lost a lot of staff that we're having to rebuild. We're taking on a lot of responsibility. And so I think it's going to be really important in this intermediate time, as kind of longer term planning is happening, that we advocate for our team and resources for the programs that we're supporting to be supported by other programs. And thank you to, adept support like Mr. Bossi coming in and supporting part-time through Waterfront, and also resources. We're coming to the limit of our reserves. We might be below our reserves potentially projected. And we've taken on new responsibilities. So that's something that we need to look at. Like, we're stepping up to a major city need, and the resources for this program are not being met in turn. I think it's just important for everyone to know that this committee and the staff, I think, take these issues extremely seriously, but there's also some major challenges that we as a committee need to vocalize and advocate for, so that we can continue to serve the city at the level that we have historically through an emergency and then adaptation. So I just really want to appreciate all the work that everyone's done. I think there already have been major improvements from the initial parklet and kind of emergency kind of outdoor dining. And there's clearly further to go, but I think that us, and then also partnering groups within Public Works and others, are making it happen. And so I really do think that it's important that everyone be clear how seriously we take all these issues and how much we are getting into a position to make further progress, but that we're going to need support in order to do that. We can't just ask our current staff and budget to take on new responsibilities.
Thank you, Mr. France. Mrs. Silver.
One of the things that surprised me when I joined this committee at the beginning of the year was the degree of mission creep that was apparent from what I understood the committee was all about. So I do appreciate the things everybody is saying, and what I'm looking at is accountability for the roles we have taken on. So yes, we're filling in an emergency as best we can, but we still have certain responsibilities if we agree to do that. So to push back at this point and say, really, this is beyond us, I see that as a positive step.
All right, thank you, Ms. Silver, appreciate that. Any other comments or questions? Okay, with that, we'll close this item. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to Downtown Ambassador Program update.
Thank you, Mr. Pinner. So this month we have Roy Forney and Sergio Arriaga to give the committee an update on the status of our ambassador program and the current challenges and situations that we're facing. I think it's been a little bit since we have last checked in with the committee on this specific program. So I'm going to hand it over to Roy and let him take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, Chair Pinner, committee members. Yeah, this morning I will be giving that update on their downtown ambassador program. I just wanted to start off with just a little bit of history of the program. Before we took this program over, it was at the police department under their CSO program, or their community service officer program, where like us, their program was based on providing that presence on State Street, but utilizing some enforcement to try to curb some of the behavior on State Street. So in 2017, we took the program over along with the funding and changed the program to the Downtown Ambassador Program, where we too was making a point to provide that presence on State Street, but using customer service instead of that enforcement side of the program. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So our mission is to enhance the State Street experience by providing a consistent presence and working alongside local organizations, businesses, and citizens for wholesome solutions. Next slide, please. So right now, currently, we have 17 ambassadors on staff. We're continuing to recruit and trying to get up to 18 staff members. This number is a big number to get to, and our shortfall in staffing is like a lot of what we're seeing everywhere, including our downtown parking operations, which is just a lack of interest and a lack of people applying. Our current shifts are Monday through Sunday. We have 2 shifts. We have one shift 9 to 2 p.m. and a second shift that is 1 to 6 p.m. Our area of coverage for the Downtown Ambassador Program is from the 0 block of State Street all the way up to the 1300 block. And we're constantly providing that presence on the street between those blocks. Next slide, please. So just to go over a couple things, I think this is kind of one of the bigger pieces that we've seen out on street, whether it's with businesses or the public. It really is what our downtown ambassadors do and cannot do. So just a point of reference, we are the first point of contact in the downtown area. So as you can see in this picture, we put our ambassadors in that bright red shirt with the city logo, Downtown Ambassador on it. So anyone on street knows that there is a presence out there. There is somebody that could be contacted if there's something of need. So second item is welcoming visitors, tourists, and locals. And that is really just providing directions or even recommendations on going to local businesses and restaurants, and any other question they might have where the public restroom is, those kind of questions. Next item is observing and reporting State Street conditions and issues. And this is kind of one of the big ones that we're doing on State Street, which is really just being able to evaluate what's happening on State Street. A lot of it has to do with maintenance and cleanup. You know, we're right there on State Street, being able to take a picture and sending it to our maintenance contractor, where it's like, hey, we need this cleaned up on State Street. It's firsthand information. It really is a value to the city to be able to do that instead of a member of the public complaining about it and then it going through multiple different city departments to try to get taken care of. We look at things like missing bricks, trip hazards, missing or damaged signs, informing, you know, of those on State Street. If any municipal codes are being broken, we can go in a very customer service oriented way, just let them know like, hey, we shouldn't be doing this on State Street. And then of course, contacting PD if there's something that is not being taken care of, something that's not being done. We will most definitely call dispatch and ask for assistance. Regular contact with State Street businesses. This is where we really take time to actively listen to the downtown business owners and hear what their concerns are or what recommendations they have. And then of course, providing that information to whatever city department would be the ones that take care of that issue. It is nice. So again, you know, members of the public or business owners don't have to try to figure out who to contact in case of having issues on State Street. And then last but not least, we're connecting the homeless with organizations who could provide resources. And that really is, you know, a firsthand information when it comes to, you know, we go up to one of our friends on State Street, really figure out what their needs are. We contact CityNet or whatever local organization may be able to help, whether it's they need something to eat, clothing, housing, reunifications, that kind of stuff. So that is what we do. Next slide, please. So what we do not do, and this is kind of a bigger thing for us in terms of what we're trying to provide for State Street and those on State Street is, and I get it and I understand there are problems on State Street, and I know everybody wishes we can go and take care of them just as easy as it hopefully it could be, but we're not enforcement, and therefore we do not cite or arrest. You know, and that's kind of one of the big things. It's like, you know, where's that citation book? We didn't do that for a reason for our ambassadors. That CSO program that I referred to in the beginning, they used to do that, and there was a lot of problems, you know, a lot of arguments, a lot of physical altercations that took place when one of the CSO members was trying to provide a citation to somebody in the public who wasn't abiding by the rules. So we got rid of that piece, and now we just inform and let somebody know, hey, you're not supposed to be doing this, please stop doing this, or we contact PD. So we are also not case managers, and therefore we do not provide resources. We're just that method of getting that information to those who can provide those resources. So we don't do this. So a lot of people will say, hey, and see us firsthand dealing with one of our friends on the street that may need something, and they may see us just make a phone call and walk away, but we're really contacting that resource and that organization who could come out and take care of that person there. So and then lastly, we're not security. We do not remove individuals from private property. That's another big one. We do receive calls from the businesses saying, hey, I got somebody in here who is stealing from us, can you come help? And it's, well, we'll send somebody over there, but we're going to contact PD because that's a PD issue. Or, you know, we've had one of the local bars say, hey, I have somebody who is not acting appropriately in the bar. Can you please come remove them? No, we don't do that either, but we'll go and assess, and we're going to call PD and help you with that situation. So those are the items we do not do. Next slide, please. So some of the partners that I was referring to, here are some of the resource organizations that we work with to help get those resources to those who experiencing homelessness on State Street. And that's United Way, Noah's Anchorage, Doctors Without Walls, AmeriCorps, Home for Good, CityNet, Behavioral Wellness, SBAC, and Downtown Organization. Those are the groups we utilize to really get those resources to those experiencing homelessness on State Street. We also have a regional action plan meeting that takes place weekly, where ourselves, those groups, plus PD, have a meeting. They discuss some of the issues that are taking place on State Street and really try to find ways to mediate those issues. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to put a little bit in reference to what we're doing on State Street. Here you'll see these are just some August stats that we have. There was 35 contacts that we had with CityNet trying to provide resources to homeless and those experiencing homelessness on State Street. We made 14 calls to dispatch. There was 119 calls to our maintenance contractor for cleanups and removing graffiti and that kind of thing. And then there was 574 municipal code warnings: aggressive panhandling, smoking prohibited, trespassing, sidewalk sleeping, and sidewalk skateboarding and biking. There's plenty more that we really try to at least educate the public and those out there if they're doing something wrong on street. Next slide, please. So I also put together numbers for the last 6 months, just so again, we haven't had this discussion about what our ambassadors are doing. So as you can see, those numbers go up in terms of how many times we're contacting CityNet for Resources, or even other resource agencies. You know, Doctors Without Walls is a big one that we're at least trying to assist with those experiencing homelessness that have some type of medical issue on State Street. 85 calls to dispatch, and majority of those calls, again, are to our non-emergency number, just trying to get a peace officer to come out and assist us on State Street. 347 maintenance calls, and then plenty of municipal code warnings. Next slide, please. So when it comes to some of the success stories, you know, there are plenty of stories that we can discuss and talk about when it comes to, you know, us getting, or I should say at least assisting with getting some of our local homeless housed or reunified with family, you know, medical assistance and all those things. It's always a success story if we're getting somebody some resources. But some of the ones that I kind of wanted to talk about are some of the things that might even be unmeasured, which is how many phone calls are not going to 911 or dispatch because we're out there and can assist with something. You know, we receive a lot of phone calls here in our office from businesses, you know, are saying, hey, we have one of our local homeless that are out front and you know, they're panhandling or they need assistance and we're there. So we're really taking a lot of those phone calls off of you know, PD, and then of course assisting them. Another big one is just firsthand knowledge. A lot of those resource agencies that I showed earlier that were on the slide, you know, they spend a lot of time just, hey, where is this person located? They could spend a whole day trying to look for somebody who they're trying to house, but now there's firsthand information to where that person can be located. And so they'll send us a text message or a phone call. We get that right of way. We're on street. Hey, we've seen so-and-so. They're located right here, right now. Guess what? That resource is there immediately instead of looking for that person. So real-time feedback, I know I discussed this a little earlier. Real-time feedback to maintenance issues on State Street is a huge one. Us being able to call our maintenance contractor and really getting something cleaned up on State Street that might have sat there for days or hours, you know, is getting done much faster because we're seeing it firsthand. And then, you know, I know times are very hard on State Street with kind of what's going on and our local homeless, but we are most definitely able to provide assistance to the business owners out there. So for every business owner that may be upset over what's going on, there's a lot of business owners that we're assisting in some way of going over there and removing somebody or asking somebody to move on, or calling PD or calling for cleanups. And so there's a lot of happy business owners and people out there that we are out there. And again, there is somebody firsthand, there's somebody out there creating that presence out there on State Street. So those are the major success stories that we have. Some, again, that are unseen. And I think most importantly for me, I just wanted to give recognition to Sergio Arriaga, who is the parking coordinator who spearheads this operation. He really is the one, you know, doing the interviewing, the hiring, the training. He is the spearhead of all of this. So I'd like to thank him for doing what he does. It is and can be a very difficult job at times, but gratifying in that sense that we're trying to make a difference on State Street. That pretty much concludes the presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Forney, very much. Very, very much appreciate the presentation. I'll open it up to the committee for any questions or comments on this matter. So I do have a couple questions. If I heard correctly, I saw on the slide that we talked about 7 ambassadors right now. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what, sort of at our peak, what the peak number of ambassadors we had, sort of without the hiring problem?
So that's twofold. We originally started with $150,000, which put us in a position to hire 8 to 12 ambassadors. And I think at one point, I think we were closer to 8 or 9 is what we were holding on to. And then we were given another 150 from the smoking grant money. And that's where our number went to 18. And so I believe at our highest, we were at 17. Well, that smoking grant money went away. We went back to 9. And then we recently got the 150 back to try to get to 18. So we're around 9 to 10, and then of course we had a few that left recently over the course of the last couple months. So we're down to 7, and now since we got that money back, we're trying to get back to 18. And for everything, including our downtown operations, it's just very hard to hire people right now. We're hoping that changes.
And I'm assuming you feel that that lower number has a significant impact on it limits the impact that we can have because we're probably not out there as often as you'd like to see it with the lower numbers.
Yes, sir, Chair Pinner. Yeah, we do know with that number closer to 18, I think we had 3 shifts that were per day. We were here a little bit later. There was a mid shift. We had some overlap, so it would be like 4 ambassadors out there. We go in groups of 2. So instead of just having 2 and 4 for a small period of time, there was just more boots on the ground. And yes, providing a better service because we had more people out there for sure.
Thank you. And one other question for me is, and I appreciate the stat information. I think that's very helpful for us to see. And I highly concur with the ability to direct ambassador directing traffic, as you will, to police, to CityNet, to maintenance. It sounds like what they're doing a lot of. Do we track the number of calls we're taking in from businesses? Is there a way to know how many times we're getting called from the businesses?
Yes, sir, Chair Pinner, we do keep track of that. We have a log sheet here in the office, and I apologize about not putting that on the stats. We can most definitely bring that to the committee. We received some here in the office. I know some of the local businesses also have the ambassador phone numbers. Each ambassador team is provided with a phone that they utilize for work. So they're also receiving calls. So we'll try to figure that out and find out exactly how many businesses and business owners are contacting our
That just might be another indication of sort of involvement, success, frustration, whatever those opportunities may be that we're hearing from businesses, whether you're getting a lot of calls, meaning there's a lot of issues that are needing to be addressed, or just maybe another piece of the puzzle. So, okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? All right, Mr. France, and then I'll go to you, Mr. Newkirk, after Mr. France.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Pinner. Thank you, Mr. Forney. This is a great update. Really appreciate this after we haven't been updated for a while. I just want to appreciate that we will have funding back up again for what's more of a full team for the ambassadors. And I really hope with the whole of the promenade, I think this program is especially important. And I hope that we're able to find other sources of funding and support as we're able to staff back. Because I think it's a really important addition to our downtown that hopefully can be sustained over the long haul.
Thank you, Mr. France.
Thank you, Mr. France. Mr. Newkirk.
Thanks, Chair Pinner. And thank you, Mr. Forney, for the presentation. This was really helpful. And I think it'd be helpful for us to maybe get updates on kind of how the hiring and staffing goes in the future. And maybe it's something we want to highlight to those higher up. I don't know if it's a question of whether we have to reconsider hourly rates for hourly workers. I don't know, obviously right now, hiring is, across, the hourly workforces in the community are really hard. And I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. So I wonder if we need to consider being more competitive in hourly rates. Obviously, that would impact the overall budgeting for the ambassador program, but I think that's something that we want to keep an eye on moving forward if it is hard to hire and retain folks. I think having boots on the ground, being able to connect, especially on the issue of homelessness, being able to connect those individuals to the right resources is really critical. So I think that providing that service is really invaluable to those individuals, and then for State Street as a whole. So I think that's something we should try to keep an eye on, and maybe you know, in the future, if need be, kind of make some recommendations for changes if we need to support that program.
Thank you, Mr. Newkirk. I appreciate the information, and I will most definitely look into getting some more stats on the hiring and staffing. I can tell you, because we did recently do that with our operations and our operators. Last month, we had 14 of our operators resign, and we hired 10 of them. And so we do know these times come, especially with school starting and some other things that kind of come up with having staff that's typically younger. So turnover, again, those stats are very interesting, because you could just look at a number and just see that 7, but when you know a few came in and some left, it really just gives a different picture. So appreciate that information. I'll most definitely bring some stats to the table.
Mr. Argy, you have a comment?
Good morning, Chairman Pinner and committee members. I just want to give you basically an update regarding the calls that we get from businesses. It's on average for the last few months, it's about 40 to 50. So it just depends on the month, but that's basically, you know, what we get on average. You know, it all depends on the municipal code. A lot of them are sleeping in the alcoves calls or just disturbance calls and just in general. So just thought I'd provide that.
Thank you very much for that follow-up information. Thank you. Well, thank you for that. I'd like to open up public comment at this time. So Ms. Clark, if you could do that.
Sure thing. So if anybody in the audience would like to make public comment, go ahead and use that raise your hand button right now. I'm not seeing any at this moment. We'll give them another second to respond. Okay, it looks like we don't have any speakers on this item.
All right, thank you, Ms. Clark. Well, thank you, Mr. Forney. I'm bringing this to us. I do think it's very important. I do think there is sometimes a misunderstanding of what the ambassadors can do and what they can't do. And I think your slide about the police and no tickets and not a security force is important for the community to understand and know that this is not what the ambassadors do, because a lot of them think that's what they do. So we need to continue to remind the public that their job is to, as you put out, just help downtown resources get to where they need to get to and help people feel heard. I think is one of the main things they can do, is let people know that they've been heard, and whether it's a visitor trying to find a place around town or a business trying to get resources to help their business as far as activity on the street. I think the ambassadors are doing a great job in doing that. I do agree that you probably need more folks to, and probably consistent folks. It's hard if they're changing like that. And I understand with school, but it might be hard if they're constantly changing to get consistent operations. So thank you for that. Appreciate it very much. And we look forward to maybe another update and, you know, near the end of the year or at the beginning of the next year as we change seasons.
Thank you, Chair Payne.
All right. All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is our program updates. So I think we have 3 items on the program updates.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're going to start off with a quick update on our efforts to automate operations in the parking lot and install that license plate recognition software. So I believe Roy's going to be coming back and giving you an update on that.
Thank you, Sarah, Chair Pinner, committee members. Appreciate the time for this as well. I just wanted to let everybody know in regards to our efforts of the installation for the LPR. It's pretty much status quo from the last meeting that we had with regards to there needed to finish up some conduit work and underground boring for that conduit over at lot 11 and 12. That was completed. They poured some pads. We're going to be putting up some poles, and our cameras should be up by the end of the month, which will give us an opportunity to start testing the LPR system. Let's see, our SWEB mobile pay, that also is still in the works. I believe some of the software engineers and stuff are still working on some issues that they're having with that. So we hope that that is functional and ready to go by the end of the month as well for testing. And otherwise, we're just kind of we're still going in the direction of getting this completed. So that's pretty much all the updates that I have for LPR. Hopefully we'll have some more for next meeting.
Thank you very much. All right, next item is Paseo update, Lot 3. Good morning, Ms. Swanson.
Good morning.
If you could just give us an update on the activity on Paseo. I know we had an eventful Historic Landmarks Commission meeting last month.
Yes, so good morning, Chair Pinner and committee members. Just a brief update on the Lot 3 Paseo project. As you may recall, this project includes closing the existing Paseo with decorative walls and gates, and also constructing a new Paseo and mid-block crossing at Figueroa Street. And the purpose was to address historical problems in the Paseo, nuisance activity for health and safety reasons, and also address the dominant pattern of travel we've seen for how pedestrians walk from Lot 3 and cross Figueroa Street, more in alignment with the Lot 4 Paseo. So this project has been through several iterations over the years, which you've seen. It did go on hold, during COVID, and most recently we decided to divide the project up into 2 phases. The first phase being just simply the closure of the Paseo, the walls and gates, and the adjacent businesses would be able to continue to use their trash and recycling storage back there, and would be the ones with access. And then the second phase was to do the larger project of a new Paseo or pathway and the mid-block crossing. And the purpose of splitting it up was to expedite the closure portion as we have ongoing problems and issues. And we didn't want, there's a lot of more moving parts in the larger project. We didn't want to hold up moving forward with the closure. As you may have seen, if you've been out there, we did put up some temporary fences and gates at both ends of the Paseo in spring of this year. And that was in response to, again, just ongoing problems and adjacent business owners calling us about those issues. So on August 18th, we took the project, just the phase 1 portion, the closure, to the Historic Landmarks Commission for review and approval. At that meeting, they ended up continuing the project indefinitely with direction to, 1, remove temporary fencing, come back with a design that they could approve. The temporary fencing did not go before them. And then also come back either with 2 options, look again at restoring the existing Paseo, or come back with the big project as a whole. Don't phase it out. They want to see it all together. Following that meeting, a few members of the HLC did bring the project to the attention of City Council, just with concerns about our approach to the phasing. I think also concerns with the short-term and long-term closure proposals. So it has gotten to that level, and in coordination with and direction from Cliff, our Public Works Director, basically the steps moving forward, we plan to work with community development staff and HLC members to get some approval and recommendations for keep the temporary fencing up, because we think that's important. It's helped the situation with the adjacent businesses. And then we will likely take the project back as a whole so they can see the big picture and not just one phase at a time. However, the goal would be to still move forward with the construction of the closure portion as soon as possible. The HLC also did ask for some additional elements for the new Paseo that, you know, could get could potentially add to the cost of the project. So we're gonna have to revisit budget and design and balancing all that out. And as the design develops further, we'll bring it back to this commission with an update so you can see where it's at. We also plan to reach out again to the adjacent businesses and make sure we're all up to speed with their interests and concerns, especially as we, prior to moving forward and going back to the HLC with a larger project. So that's where we're at now, and let me know if you have questions or comments.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson. I just have a couple comments. I want to thank Ms. Swanson for the effort she's put into this. I did attend the HLC meeting, and it was a challenging meeting to say the least, and Ms. Swanson did a great job in representing the project. I can report that HLC was strongly opposed to basically the closure of Paseo. I don't think they are like the idea of the closure of any Paseo. And I did speak at the meeting with the point for DPC indicating that we see Paseos as sort of the pathway to our parking operations to and from. And if they're unsafe or unclean or not used, because people don't tend to walk down this Paseo, that we were looking to provide a better alternative for the community. So I think Ms. Swanson represented that well. I think they were very frustrated with the separation of the project, approving only the closure and not approving the new path. So I think we do need to bring that back to HLC and let them see the full picture again, which they had seen probably 2 years ago. So I think it was just sort of out of thought for them. So I think we'll get there and help our businesses out that are in that area with that problem. So thank you, Ms. Swanson. Are there any questions from the committee on that matter? Okay. Then we have one last. Thank you, Ms. Swanson. Appreciate it very much. Did you have a question, Mr. Newkirk? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, saw your hand move. The screen is wide now. I've got lots of faces to watch. Last thing is we have an announcement for a new team member.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. We've talked a lot today in the different topic areas about keeping, retaining employees, just getting employees, especially our hourly crew, whether that be ambassadors or operational, as far as kiosk workers and things like that. So I did want to fill you on some of our latest employment news, and this is good news. We can end this meeting on a positive. With the retirement of Dion Tate, which we talked about last month's meeting, Mr. Mark Nunez has been appointed as the acting facilities maintenance supervisor. Mark has a great wealth of experience here with the city of Santa Barbara, and he has jumped on that position and has hit the ground running. It was a seamless transition, and we thank Mark for stepping up to the plate for that. I should also let you know that that position on the longer term, that was advertised and it closed about a week and a half ago, and the process to permanently fill that position is underway as well. So as you know, that takes a little bit of time, but we're happy to have Mark step up to the plate as our acting facilities maintenance supervisor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Boss, for that great news. I know Mr. Tate's shoes will be a hard one to fill, but I'm sure there will be great people stepping up and taking on that role. So thank you very much. That concludes our program updates. Do we have any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay.
Mr. Pratt or Mr. Pinner, excuse me.
Yes.
You do need to take public comment.
I always think on program updates, I don't. Okay. We'll open up public comment on item number 11.
Okay, and I am not seeing any hands raised for this item.
Thank you, Ms. Clark, for that. Okay, just want to mention Mr. France will be running our next meeting in October. I will not be able to attend, So I encourage everyone else to be there to make sure we have a quorum. So thank you, and thank you, Mr. France, for doing that.
And
with
I'll be
that,
on time for that one.
You'll be on time. Good. That way, that will be important. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate your involvement in this committee and your involvement with our city. And with that, we will move to adjournment. Thank you. Have a great day. Great rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.